Indrajit, let's get started. Can you give us an overview of current state of 5G in India? And how do you see the 5G landscape shaping up, especially in subsequent to the recent spectrum auction?
No, thank you so much for that question, here. It's really exciting times for communications and network technology here in India. The spectrum went off like in what might be called a grand success, as declared by the government and the industry as well. The proceeds from the sale of the spectrum have amounted to around 1.5 trillion Indian rupees, and around 70% of the auctioned spectrum, right, was actually taken up by these industry players you mentioned. It's been it's exciting more in the Indian context because what we're looking at is grand plans for deployment at scale, at population scale, and hopefully, while initially uptake might be more in niche categories, we presume that this is going to be, a quick rollout going forward. Albeit there would be some challenges, but nonetheless exciting times. How I see this playing out is basically going to be a mix that's going to come out of the strategies that are being adopted by these players, and it's a very unique, interesting case because Airtel, in its wisdom, has decided to go on a sort of non-standalone mode of 5G network deployment. And at the same time, Geo has chosen to go with the more time-consuming, yet the more promising standalone 5G network infrastructure, right? And the difference here is that there's a fifth generation core radio network that powers this all. And so it sort of gives you those additional capabilities of network slicing and dedicated quality of service parameters for each and every dedicated application, right? And while yes, that is the more exciting part, I also see a very crucial part being played by the non-standalone network expansion, at least in terms of immediate gains. We see a wider rollout, a faster rollout, greater data speeds right off the bat, and I think the coming months and the route to final commercial operations is going to be exciting. It was good to see the government having taken this effort so far. They had eased out norms for running 5G trials, and they have stuck to good prudence in terms of just the auction base prices. And I think it's been a successful auction. So yeah, exciting times for India and 5G.
Absolutely. Government made difference this time to avoid the bankruptcies that previous auction created, and delayed the rollout. This time they also, as you know, that they expanded the payback or payout or paying off this spectrum over 20 years, with 20 years of ownership. So that is also very interesting. So now 5G networks, as you said, are expected to roll out as early as next month in tier one cities and across the nation by the end of next year. So what type of innovation 5G is likely to bring in other sectors?
A whole host of them, and I think the government is quite attuned to this. There was a reason why there was this concerted policy push towards uptake of 5G, and the exciting thing is just the other day we were at a session with the telecom regulator and we were discussing metaverse. And metaverse as a platform is going, the heart and soul, the infrastructure that's going to power it is going to be 5G network technologies, right? And the sort of latencies that are required, the sort of fidelity that is required for metaverse applications to take off can only be delivered by 5G. And what was very intriguing to note is that the TRAI chairperson personally commented that before we could even figure out how 5G is going to be deployed, I think technology and everything else is racing towards sixth generation already. And so it's going to be a continuum. And metaverse being one application, to power AR, VR, extended realities. There's going to be a whole host of other applications, some of which you actually mentioned, like, autonomous cars and, machine-to-machine communications. Adani, for instance, is one of the bidders who was bid for the 26 gigahertz, very like highest of the frequency bands that were available in the spectrum, primarily for industrial captive usage purposes. They want to bolster security of their industrial assets, and I think that's a good play. And it's supported by other policy developments that have preceded this. You recently the captive private networks were permitted in India, and there was a dedicated paper to understand what bands could be used for these purposes, and at least some bands in the wave spectrum, as well as the 26 gigahertz spectrum, were considered as adequate, as appropriate bands and candidates. So let's see what more innovation we see, but definitely a lot along the line of like extended realities and machine-to-machine communications, and possibilities are sort of abound there.
Absolutely, Indrajit. And you mentioned very interesting point about Adani buying this spectrum to connect, or have that industrial asset connected, and that's basically very interesting example of Internet of Things.